All right, today we're going to talk about a hidden financial trap, one that makes even the smartest, most experienced leaders make some really disastrous calls. It's called the sunk cost fallacy. And believe me, if you're managing any kind of budget, you absolutely need to know how to spot it and avoid it.
You've seen this happen, right? It's one of the most frustrating things for any manager. You're looking at the numbers, you're looking at the data, and it is crystal clear. This project is a money pit. It's bleeding cash. The logical thing to do is to just pull the plug. But for some reason, doing that feels almost impossible. So, what is going on here?
Well, the answer is a really powerful psychological trap. To put it simply, it's our brain's tendency to justify spending more money, time, or effort on something precisely because we've already spent so much. All those past investments, the capital, the hours, the team's energy, they're gone. They're sunk. And yet, they start to irrationally dictate our future decisions. And let's be really clear about this. Falling for this isn't a sign of being a bad manager. Not at all. It's about how all of our brains are wired. So let's actually dig into the psychology here to understand what's happening under the hood that makes every single one of us so vulnerable to this trap. At the absolute core of the sunk cost fallacy is a simple but incredibly powerful human truth. Our brains are built to hate losing far more than they enjoy winning.
Really, it's like a cocktail of three different biases all working against your better judgment. The first, and maybe the biggest, is loss aversion, which we'll get to in a sec. Then you've got commitment bias. That's that internal pressure we all feel to stick to our guns and not look like we made a mistake. And finally, there's the simple status quo bias. It's just inertia. It almost always feels easier to just keep doing what you're doing than to make a big, scary change.
Think about it like this for a second. Losing $100,000 doesn't just feel bad, it feels like a fire you have to put out, an urgent problem you need to solve. And often, the solution that comes to mind is throwing more money at it to fix it. But a $100,000 gain? Yeah, that feels great, but it just doesn't have that same gut punch intensity. Studies show the psychological pain of loss is literally about twice as powerful as the pleasure of winning. And that imbalance right there, that's the trap.
Okay, so we have the theory. Now let's look at what happens when this little psychological glitch plays out in the real world, turning what were once promising projects into complete financial black holes.
The Concorde is the absolute textbook example of this. By the mid-1960s, it was glaringly obvious that the economics just weren't going to work. But because the British and French government had already poured so much money into it, they just kept going. And the result? A true marvel of engineering that was a complete and utter commercial disaster, wasting millions over its relatively short life. $7 billion. That is the absolutely staggering amount of money the hedge fund Melvin Capital lost in a single month. As their big bet against GameStop went completely sideways, what do? Instead of cutting their losses, they doubled down, again and again, becoming a perfect high-speed, modern-day example of the sunk cost fallacy in brutal action.
Eventually, the founder, Gabe Plotkin, had to write in a letter to his shareholders, "I now recognize that I need to step away." He finally did, but only after the losses were catastrophic. It's just a painful lesson that by the time you're forced to admit you were wrong, the real damage is already done.
Okay, so we've seen the problem, we've seen the very real consequences. Now for the most important part. How can you, as a manager, build a system to actually fight this bias and start making truly objective decisions?
Here's a really practical 4-step framework you can use. First, and this is the hardest part, acknowledge the sunk costs. You have to formally agree with your team that the money already spent is gone. It's irrelevant. Second, do a fresh analysis. Ask this question: if this project in its current state was pitched to us as a brand new idea today, would we fund it? Third, and this is crucial, set objective stop-loss points in advance. Before you even start, define the clear, data-driven triggers that will force you to reevaluate or just walk away. And fourth, get an outside opinion. Find someone you trust who has no skin in the game, no emotional attachment, to give you their cold, hard take.
And if you really want to put that framework into action, there's an amazing tool that's designed to strip the emotion right out of the equation. It's called a decision matrix.
Let's just look at how this works. Instead of a vague debate about whether to continue or abandon Project A, the matrix forces you to put numbers on it. Look here. Continuing Project A means another $500,000 for a potential ROI of $750K, but it has a high risk factor. But look at this third option. What if we take that same $500,000 and reallocate it to Project B? Well, the potential ROI jumps to 1.2 million, and the risk is lower. When you score it all out, the emotional pull of saving Project A just vanishes, and the most logical, rational path becomes mathematically obvious.
So, what's the real payoff for all this discipline? It's all about reframing the entire conversation, changing what it actually means to succeed in your organization.
You know, we work in a business culture that is often terrified of what looks like failure, but we have to redefine what winning actually looks like. Sometimes the single most rational, most profitable, and frankly, bravest decision you can make is to abandon a project and cut your losses.
At the end of the day, here's what you need to remember. Pulling the plug on a failing project is not an admission of a past failure. It is a powerful act of disciplined capital reallocation. It's a strategic move to stop wasting resources on something with low potential, so you can free them up for an opportunity that can actually create real value. And that is the very essence of great financial management.
So I'll leave you with a question to take back to your team. Take a really hard, honest look at your current portfolio. Which of your projects are you funding because of the money you've already spent versus which ones are you funding because of their genuine potential to deliver future value? I think the answer might just surprise you.